Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and today we're looking at the third entry in The Grudge. The Grudge 3 is the black sheep of the trilogy, starting with its distribution. While The Grudge 1 and 2 premiered in theaters, The Grudge 3 debuted on disc. The faces behind this release differ as well. Steven Susko, who handled writing on the first two films, is absent. In his stead is Brad Keane. The Grudge 3 takes direction from a man who's not completely alien to the series. Directing the movie is Toby Wilkins, who had previously directed the Tales from the Grudge web series. This marks the first film in the Ju-On franchise not to be directed by Takashi Shimizu. Shimizu seemed hesitant to return to his old role, saying, "I don't know if I'd be a director. I'd like to keep the unique tone of Ju-On, so in any event I'd like to get involved as a producer or writer, maybe director. But I'd like to look forward to producing Grudge 3. And so Takashi Shimizu became executive producer for the film. But might this have affected casting? Takako Fuji and Takashi Shimizu seemed inseparable professionally. I mean, both being born on the same exact day, how could they not be? Takashi Shimizu would even say,
あって他の監督にもう完全に任せちゃう形だったら火薬役他の人っていうこともあるかもしれないですけど、僕が監督している限りは考えられないし、もし他の人で火薬をやったものがシリーズで続いたとしたら僕はそれは自分だとは思わないです。
Yet without him directing, would Takako Fuji return once more? Sadly, she didn't. After almost a decade of playing the character, The Grudge 3 marks the first time Fuji declined the role of Kayako. But I don't know if I believe Shimizu's absence as director is responsible for Fuji's refusal. In a 2006 interview, Fuji stated she would continue to play Kayako as long as Shimizu wished. But at the same time, she displayed some weariness towards the role. It's difficult sometimes to keep up the motivation because I've played her so many times. So maybe Shimizu relented on Fuji's inclusion out of respect for the actress's well-deserved break. And thus, we arrive at the movie, so let's step into The Grudge 3. The story follows the Morrisons living in the Chicago apartment complex from the previous film. Max Morrison, the landlord, looks after his two younger sisters consisting of Lisa, a young woman with her eyes set on a New York fashion career, and Rose, a child inflicted with a breathing condition. Troubled by the departing residents that threaten Max's job and the curse that threatens tenants' lives, the Morrisons search for a solution to their conundrum before it's too late. First, how does the film portray the iconic Saekis? The Grudge 3 features a new Toshio played by Shinba Tsuchiya, whom I unfortunately see unfit for the role. The actor was either unable or refused to mimic the wide mouth actors in the role before him could summon. The inability of the film to recreate this striking image diminishes his impact. But even if the film could recapture that visual, Tsuchiya's too old for the role. At the time of filming, Tsuchiya was just 1 month from turning 13 and his proportions don't hide it. He's about 5 years older than the Toshio that played him in the prior film and twice as old as the Toshio from Ju-On the Grudge. I believe the role of Toshio requires an early child youth to effectively convey how short his life was cut. As for Kayako, she is played by Aiko Horiuchi. In the role, she moves her head and swerves rather than the jerks Takako Fuji had employed. I preferred Fuji's portrayal that made it seem like Kayako's bones were snapping into place. However, for the big shoes she has to fill, Horiuchi puts in an admirable effort, making her a fine Kayako. It helps that Kayako's appearances are unique. I especially enjoy her in Gretchen's death. The buildup of her handprints trailing her movement and her morphing out of this painting is all creative. Sadly, not all of the film's scares are as effective though. I found this big head mode Kayako odd. And then there's this scene. For context, earlier, Rose left a Mr. Potato Head out for Toshio, only for Lisa to later find... I couldn't keep a straight face during this scene. Who would find Mr. Potato Head scary? On top of that, the presentation is a tad different. The Grudge 3 is the first R-rated film in the series, and it shows. Eye gouging, throat marring, and the like are not absent from this picture. This can be viewed as a good thing or a bad thing. On the one hand, it betrays the more subtle presentation of the source material and previous films. On the other hand, the gore is well paced. As the tension rises, so does the brutality. It proportionately portrays the film's intensity, even if it's through a method I find arbitrary. Maybe it would appeal to some, but for me it seemed out of place compared to the rest of the trilogy. In spite of its ups and downs, the horror overall is alright, but how does its story fare? I'm not fond of the scenario that is the Saekis haunting the Chicago apartment. The original house held so much meaning because it's where the Saekis hoped to raise a family, not to mention the tragedy there that demolished that wish. However, the Saekis hold no such emotional attachment to the apartment. The emotional depth between the spirits and setting is made shallow. Although, in spite of my distaste for this scenario, I don't blame The Grudge 3 as much. The Grudge 2 made this bed, The Grudge 3 just has the unfortunates of lying in it. The structure differs from the previous films. The Grudge 3 follows a more normative linear narrative opposed to the usual anachronic presentation of the series. I prefer the many segments in the non-linear narrative of the Japanese originals because I find it makes the movies a fun puzzle to piece together. The adaptation of this in the American trilogy has never been consistent. The Grudge had a stronger focus on a single protagonist, but still dabbled in achronological character segments for a few scenes. You might think I would detest the direction of The Grudge 3 because its structure is the furthest detached from the source material, but I'm not unfond of it. Rather than The Grudge, which picks and chooses when to adapt the presentation of the original, I appreciate that The Grudge 3 fully commits to a narrative structure, even if it's unfaithful to Ju-on. But I do have more definitive positives regarding the movie. The characters were used to great effect. I'm usually a fan of an investigating character, and Dr. Sullivan fits that bill. It was neat to see her findings shift her rationalization of the curse to belief. And I'm a Saw fan, she's Shawnee Smith. I had to bring her up. Apparently the back of the box feels the same as the description and images mislead you into thinking she's the protagonist. Yeah, just don't let them on about the film's midpoint. Then there's Rose, who is the perfect victim. Her vulnerability due to her illness heightens tension. Max goes through a lot. Between Lisa leaving, ill Rose, his career in danger, and the curse, I found him easy to empathize with. Max's charming relationship with his siblings only added to his likability.
I could go in a shark cage.
You could, but I'd be careful. Sharks have a taste for little girls.
It also made his cruel turn due to the curse hurt even more. The film knew just whose conflict to capitalize on too. Unlike The Grudge 2, which gave little focus to the conflict between Jake and his turned family, the familial discourse takes hold of the latter third of The Grudge 3's plot. It's really engaging to see Lisa and Rose's despair from seeing Max turn on them. The ending is noteworthy as well. Rose drinks Kayako's blood in a ritual to subdue the curse. However, this results in Kayako's spirit residing in Rose. This ritual from Kayako's past was established in The Grudge 2, but had little relevancy to said film. I admire The Grudge 3 for picking up the slack of the previous movie by giving this plot point purpose by making it the basis of the climax. The ending also achieves a bittersweet sense of reward in that the characters achieve their goal while also maintaining the sense of dread Ju-on conclusions are known for. It's familiar, yet unique. All in all, I found The Grudge 3 somewhat enjoyable. The horror was not without its flaws, but it was serviceable, although the gore might distance the horror too far from Ju-on for some fans. But I have to give the script some credit. Although I was not fond of the scenario The Grudge 2 left it with, The Grudge 3 worked well against that setback. The characters were likable and well utilized, and their conflict was a great focus of the plot. And the film's ending was surprising yet appropriately Ju-on. It might not be the best, but I think I prefer it over its theatrical predecessor, and for a direct-to-video sequel, that's a twist worth some admiration. I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and thank you for watching. Zibbo bye bye!